Siegel, the CEO of Meetup and the author of Decide and Conquer, 44 Decisions That Will Make or Break All Leaders. Welcome to the show, David.
I am super psyched to be here. I've loved our conversations in the past and can't wait for this one.
This is so good. Okay, so Meetup just celebrated a 20-year anniversary. Now, for those who don't know, I started Black Girl Ventures on meetup.com, okay? Because I knew that it was a place that a bunch of people who are like-minded, who cared about a thing would be going. So it was an easy way to go and find out if there were Black and brown women business owners there. And lo and behold, there was, all right? And so that was 6 years ago. And how long have you been at meetup.com? I always call it meetup.com. How long have you been at Meetup?
Well, you always call it meetup.com because originally it just wasn't .com. It was just a website. But then 10 years ago, we created the apps. And now we're, of course, Meetup as opposed to just meetup.com. I've been at Meetup for 4 years. I took over for the founder, Scott Heiferman, who was the CEO for 16 years prior to me. So I have big shoes to fill and, never able to fill a founder's shoes, but hopefully I do my best.
Now, a lot of the people who are listening, they will have launched their own things. And hopefully we'll have an opportunity to succession plan and have their things, somebody else come in and take over their things. What would you say? Because this is something I'm thinking about a lot right now for BGV. Like I'm getting the itch around, like I want to do more. I want to do other things. I built this. So it's a part of my legacy and I want it to last. But as I think about what it means to transition, I want to create a very good environment for the person coming in. What would you say is maybe like a couple tips of like someone who's the founder and you're thinking about transitioning out of the thing you built? How do you leave a good space for the person coming in?
Beautiful. What a great question. Okay. So Scott did a number of things that were extremely helpful for me in starting. I'll share a couple of them and hopefully they could be helpful to you, Omi, and hopefully helpful to Takia and all the listeners as well. So number one is he deeply, publicly embraced my taking over for him. And there was no kind of, he's taking over, but I'm going to miss it, or he has these skills and I had these skills. So we're going to complement each other. It was, what the company needs right now is David's skills. Here's how he is actually better than me in certain areas. He sent laudatory emails to the whole company. And just, even though I knew, and of course, everyone has their reservations. No one's ever perfect. No one's ever going to be able to step into your shoes or anyone else's shoes in a perfect way. Publicly, he was incredibly thoughtful and enthusiastic about support. That was number one. Number two is he said, how can I support you and not get in your way? Because in the beginning, when someone's been running a company for 16 years, and oftentimes, let's say they come directly onto the management team, and they're very opinionated because they've been running the company for 16 years, we actually aligned on him taking a 3-month break, a 3-month kind of sabbatical, which he deserved after 16 years, so that I could get my footing. I could learn a little bit more. I could figure out what worked and what didn't work. And then when he came back, I could be a lot more intelligent about how he could most help and support me. But he understood that giving space is actually really helpful. But at the same time of giving space, we got together every 3 or 4 weeks for breakfast, and he was there to support me. So giving space and at the same time, but not being absent, giving space, but supporting and being at the same time. It's almost like being a parent, right? When you're a parent of teenagers or 20-somethings like I am, you need to give them space to thrive. Yeah, I got a 21, 18, and 15-year-old. But you also need to support them at the same time. So that was the second thing that he did. And then the third thing that he did is he said, how do you want to best use me? I will do whatever you need me to do. What would be most helpful? And for me, the founder is always the heart and soul of a company. They are the DNA of the company forever will be Scott's kind of DNA. And it was very important to me not to lose that culture, that heart and soul. So one of the things that he did is, for example, whenever new employees would join, he would bring them on something called a meetup crawl, where we would go from meetup event to a meetup event to meetup event so that they could experience the power of meetup, the power of meeting people, the power of community, the power of helping people on friendship and removing loneliness, firsthand. And it was that soul of the company that founders are so great at, and he really helped to facilitate that. So there's a lot of great things that he did. that I think a lot of people can learn from.
So David, like you've been there for 4 years, right? What were you doing before? So like you didn't wake up like you might have, David, though, because you look like the type you might have woke up and was just like I'm here as CEO. But for the ones of us who didn't wake up CEO ready, where were you before and how did that help you at Meetup?
Yeah, it's kind of a not common story, actually. It's not like I woke up, and suddenly someone said, "Hey, why don't you become the CEO of Meetup? You lost the bet." So I started my career in a very atypical area, human resources. And most people in human resources stay in human resources, but I was an early employee of a very important tech company in the development of the internet called DoubleClick. It was the largest tech company that helped to facilitate advertising. It made the really internet free back in 1996, 1997, 1998. So very early days of the internet. And I was there and I was an HR manager. And I remember the CEO of DoubleClick came over to me and he said, "David, what are some of the things you focus on?" I'm like, "Well, I focus on motivating people, recruiting top talent, recruiting, hiring people, building the right organizational structure and strategy to drive success, managing people, all these other things." And he's like, that's kind of the things that I focus on as a CEO. So then I thought to myself, maybe I could be a CEO one day. So really at a pretty young age, I decided to transition from human resources to say, how can I become a CEO as an HR guy? And that was the path for me. At 26, I decided to get an MBA. And then I did a series of jobs. I worked at 1-800-Flowers for 5 years, helping to make people happy and doing floral, worked for one of the largest health publishers called Everyday Health, which is similar to WebMD in digital. Again, I've always been in the digital kind of tech space. Then I became CEO of a company called Investopedia, which is the world's largest financial education kind of site. And at one point, the biggest investor in a company that I was president of also was also on the board of WeWork. And he reached out to me and he said, "Hey, David, WeWork is looking for a new CEO of Meetup. Would you like to become the next CEO of Meetup?" And I just sold Investopedia. And I said, "I'm obsessed with Meetup. I love community. I love people. I love kind of the impact that Meetup has." So 27 interviews later, after WeWork interviewed me, yep, and Meetup interviewed me over a 4-month process, taking up over 500 hours. It was harder to get that than like getting into the CIA. I got hired.
Oh my goodness. 20 something interview.
27.
Did you have to interview with Adam Newman?
Did I ever? Yeah, I could tell a story about my interview with Adam if you're interested.
Oh yeah, totally would love a story.
Okay, here's a funny story. So I did my first interview with Adam. We had our vegan, Adam Newman, for those who don't know, the founder of WeWork, very controversial, interesting, charismatic figure in many documentaries and movies and We Crash shows, etc. And when people say to me, was We Crash really true in terms of Adam? My usual answer is no, because the actual reality was much crazier than what was in the show. Believe it or not.
Whoa.
So the story,
I'm looking at the show like, this is crazy. Did this really?
it was crazier. It was
Oh
crazier.
my goodness.
Here's an example of the crazy, and then I'll tell my Adam interview story. But in the show, they had an example of a gong where people would hit the gong. It said "We work on" it every time there was a big sale. So what people don't know is that one of the executives at WeWork at times was picked up, and his head was used to hit the gong until one time he had to be taken to a hospital and had stitches because of just, that didn't make it onto the show. And there's lots of other crazy things that didn't make it onto the show. So
yeah, that's because somebody could go to jail for that, David. That is some dangerous, David.
I wasn't involved in. I wasn't there then. I wasn't at WeWork at that particular time. But there was a lot of really dangerous things that kind of occurred, inappropriate actions that occurred at that time. So I met with Adam. We had a very nice vegan meal because WeWork made a proclamation that everything had to be vegan, no food, no meat allowed in the company or it could be expensed. And we had a very nice conversation, and he liked me, but he didn't love me. So I'm like, okay, I got to do something different. When you're in an interview, you want to mirror the person that's interviewing you, because most people like themselves. Adam certainly loved himself, and they want to hire people, unfortunately, I may add, that's oftentimes similar to themselves, which is a serious problem around in so many ways, but it's unfortunately how a lot of people tend to hire. So I thought, Adam's crazy. I need to act crazy. And if I act crazy, then I could possibly get the job. So I walked into the interview beforehand, and I walked into WeWork, and I saw I was wearing like a white button down, like nice book, nice shirt and like jeans or something. And I saw Adam through the corner of my eye. I was wearing like a t-shirt. And I saw some other guy walking around with a t-shirt that said, Meetup plus WeWork equals like success. And I'm like, wait, I'm interviewing for the job at Meetup. This guy's wearing a Meetup plus WeWork t-shirt. I got to get this guy's t-shirt. So I walked over to him and I said, can we go to the supply closet? And I take my shirt off, you take your shirt off. We trade shirts. And I have an interview with Adam right now, and he's just going to love how crazy it is that I got someone to take the shirt off their back, for an interview. And I did. And I met with Adam. He's like, where'd you get that t-shirt? And I'm like, I convinced someone to trade t-shirts with me. He's like, if you could get someone to take the shirt off their back, you're good enough to hire. It's so kind of ridiculous.
Wow. So when I think about 44 decisions that will make or break all leaders, your book, that's kind of like I feel like that's like decide to mirror one,
Yes.
right? The person that you're being interviewed by, but like, wow, do something crazy.
That's how you stand out. That's how you stand out. I mean, they were interviewing a lot of Meetup's an exceptional company.
Mhm.
You have 60 million members, and they interviewed a lot of top people from Google, Facebook, Apple, etc. So, sometimes crazy wins. And I thought that with Adam's thinking, that might be the case. So I would not have done that approach with others.
And you were right. And so, and I'm thinking that like anybody else you would have been mirroring would not have thought it was cool. So you were right on time. One of the things that Meetup is addressing, I feel like it's always addressed, not just in the pandemic, is loneliness. I remember finding out about Meetup early on in my journey, and I used to host poetry events. So I would go and find people who were interested in poetry. It was a way to kind of break out of your bubble, right? Because either you know people and you know who they are, and y'all all kind of frequent each other and things like that. But Meetup was a way to say, how can I meet new people who also care about what I care about? But talk to us a little bit about like the loneliness epidemic. Like during the pandemic where like you can't go necessarily quote meet up. What happened during those times, and how did you look at evolving a company?
Yeah, I mean, it's terrifying. According to a study by Cigna, 46% of people, not occasionally, not sometimes, but regularly feel lonely. And there's a huge difference among people who are Gen Zers, people in their late teens and early 20s, where their loneliness levels are at 62% of Gen Zers regularly feel lonely. And that's just terrifying because with loneliness comes anxiety, comes depression. God forbid, a million times could come self-harm or anything like that from loneliness. And the amount of loneliness that occurred, of course, when people are in social isolation during the pandemic was just enormous for so many different people. At Meetup, we were always about IRL. We were always about in-person only. And it was a big culture question to say, pandemics hit, what do we do? Do we say hold to what we've always believed in or not? And the answer was our mission is not IRL. Our mission is not in real life. Our mission is to keep connected. It's to drive human connections. And we need it even more during the pandemic than beforehand. So we went from literally nearly zero online events to during the pandemic, we've had over 3.5 million virtual events. Over 35 million people have participated in virtual events in like 200 different countries around the world. And it's open. It's they say this statement is a cliche, but never fail to take advantage of a crisis. We should have opened up for virtual events earlier. We were a little bit stuck in our past. And the reason why virtual events are great is, I know someone who runs an ecstatic dance meetup group, and you probably could both be in that and you probably have a great time. I could see the two of you getting down. So she had 5-10 people in her ecstatic dance group when it was in person only. Moved to global, moved to online. She has 30 people from 20 different countries playing blasting music, dancing like crazy, talking, building relationships and different chat rooms. And what it does is if someone has like this very unique passion around a very particular area, well, there may not be someone in your city, or maybe there'll only be one or two people in your city that are interested, but there could be many people around the US or around the globe that are interested in the topic. So we now, it's interesting, we're back to 80% in person and 20% online today. And hopefully that online will continue, because I still say in person is the best. But for many people, if you're in a rural environment and you're a parent of ADHD kids and there's no parent of ADHD kids meetup support group, then let's find a parent of ADHD kids kind of virtual support group to help that person as well. So it's been a really big boon for us. I still say, if you have the opportunity to do in person or online, always do in person. But if it's online or virtual versus nothing, then definitely virtual is better. And in terms of the loneliness epidemic, the number of people who I meet who have told me that they were significant introverts. They thought that they were the only people like themselves. They didn't that they were different than everyone else. And they find their people. People find their people. I was talking to an organizer yesterday. She told me this story actually, that she went to a book club before Meetup, and the book was The Help, and this is a Black woman, and there was 8 or 9 other women in the book club, no Black women, and they were saying something like, oh, this story, it has no basis in truth or reality, just the whole thing about it. And she decided she's going to start it's called the Mocha Women Book Club. And they now have 19 chapters in 19 different cities with 10,000 Black women who are all part of this book club. And that's just like amazing. What a great opportunity, for her to find her people.
All right, so Takia, you got your pencil and your paper, because we about to hear
Yes.
this from David. The thing he tells all leaders that I can't wait to hear, because anybody who writes the book, Decide and Conquer, 44 Decisions That Will Make or Break All Leaders, must know. So
Yeah, he knows. David
He
knows.
knows.
So I'm
He
ready.
knows.
David knows.
Oh boy, pressure is on. Okay, here we go. So here's the reality. When it comes to change, everyone is so afraid of change. There's so much tension that goes around change. So what I try to do is create like a process so that I'm forced to confront the question of whether or not I should make a change literally every single month. So every month I tell leaders, and we do this at Meetup, is we have a meeting and it's called, should we pivot? Should we make a change? What is not working right now that we need to change and because it's not working? We need to force that agenda on ourselves as individuals. We need to force that agenda on ourselves as a company, because then it doesn't become scary to talk about, because it becomes the only topic that is the agenda for that meeting. And then we ask ourselves, what's not working? What do we need to change? What do we need to pivot? And it becomes a lot less scary to talk about when it's already kind of a concept that we said is kind of we're forcing ourselves to talk about. So I'm a big believer generally in life in what's called forcing mechanisms, of having like very specific forced agenda topics or forced actions that we need to do in life. Like, for example, I love exercise, and I think it's very important to exercise all the time. I also love showering. So I'm like, I'm not going to shower until I exercise first. So that way I get to enjoy my shower afterwards. I'm not going to have my dessert, for example, until I have my meal first or eat something healthy first beforehand. It's like those forcing mechanisms are very important in business and in life.
You know what? I'm glad you said that, because right now, from a CEO standpoint, I've been kind of struggling a little bit with these choices. So I'm a big picture thinker. I want to do all the things, like, oh, let's go. What if we go and, fly across the land? I have all these big thoughts, but then you have to bring it down into these detail pieces. And so sometimes I have a hard time kind of matching up what I want to do versus what needs to be done versus what's going to progress some things in my life, right? And I'm always like in this battle of like, ooh, I could just do this fun thing.
Because you're such a big idea person, and
Right.
and it's the key is to rather than coming up with ideas and sharing them like every day, every week, and kind of people feeling like they're all over the place at times. It's like, okay, I'm going to have my list of ideas, And then each month, or it could be once a week, I'm going to just go through that together. And the key is I'm going to anchor each idea in the larger goal that I'm trying to achieve. What is the big goal we're trying to achieve? And how does it match up to that big goal? Because there's lots of fun ideas that people can have all the time, but how does it actually like move the needle for the big thing? So for Meetup, our big goal is ending the loneliness epidemic. That's our big goal. So we just have to ask ourselves the question every single time, will this action help to end the loneliness epidemic or will it not? And if not, probably isn't worth it to bother.
I like that because what you gave is broad enough, like it's big enough.
Yes.
Because I think sometimes I try to make my goals fathomable enough by someone, right? Because I think like that goal of like, it's real big. Like we're going to end the loneliness epidemic, right? That's a big, big, big goal. And there's enough things for you to do inside of that goal and enough steps that you can take inside of it. I really like that versus
Correct.
like,
If you set the goal as too specific, then it's going to be hard to channel everything into that very, very tight, specific goal.
well, what about like as a leader being driven by how successful that is and how you measure it, right? Because I think like if you say we're going to end the loneliness epidemic in New York, you can ask, now you got a defined amount of people, and now you have a particular location, and now you can actually measure yourself, and then I don't know whoever you need to make the case to, right? But like, what does a leader do when that decision making feels like it's you're trying to decide on like, do we have a defined measurement for somebody that's going to ask us, or is it like, hey, who's going to check us? You know what I mean? Like, how do you make that decision?
No, everything has to be measured. So, like, for example, the measurement for ending the loneliness epidemic for us is we measure how many connections Meetup drives every year. So, for example, we drive 30 million connections each year. So, and we actually measure number of connections because the more connections that people have, the less lonely people actually are. But if you just say driving the loneliness epidemic without a quantitative measurement, it's worthless. Everything, you have to find some way, some form to have it be a quantitative measurement so you could track progress, against it. And in terms of, when you roll something out, always roll out, the MVP, the minimum viable product, or what I like to call your minimum viable MVD, minimum viable decision. Like make a decision, make it quickly, have it be the minimum viable decision, and then you learn from that decision after you get it out there, and then you pivot and you change based on actually getting out there. Because too often times people are in their head with their decisions and they're trying to think through what if this happens, what if that. Don't spend too much time thinking about what if this happens, what happens. Get it out there, see what actually happens, which is chances are going to be different than what you thought, and then pivot from there. Minimum viable decisions.
Oh, that's the tech talk.
Mhm.
That's
And
the
I
tech.
think
That's
yeah, I mean, it
yeah.
really is. And I'm glad you brought that up, David, because one of the challenges that I've been hearing a lot of entrepreneurs say is that when they make that minimum viable decision, is the work that goes into bringing it to fruition. And the feeling, right? Because feelings aren't facts. The feeling that if you make a decision and then you put all of this time, energy, and effort behind that decision, and then it doesn't come to fruition, they feel like they lost something. Like
I love it. So yeah, it comes down to an understanding that when you make a decision, you're going to be wrong. It's just a question of how you could learn from that decision, how much better you can make it. If you put the pressure on yourself that when you make a decision, it has to be the right decision, it has to be the perfect decisions, or I made a mistake, I failed, therefore I'm a failure. If you start personalizing the results of things that you do and saying that you are the results of some of the actions, that's where things go awry. If you say, I failed, I learned, I am going to be successful next time because I just learned a ton. And finding ways not to personalize that failure, it gives you permission to then roll out decisions, roll out actions, do things much earlier, and then actually end up doing a better job because you learn from it versus hold on to stuff because you're afraid of kind of your own perception, usually of yourself or other people's perception of you.
You know what? Oh my goodness, we could talk about this all night. I like we really could continue this conversation for a couple iterations. I appreciate you so much for joining us. This has been so enlightening. Anything you want to share about where to go, what to do next in terms of like, should we follow you on Meetup, join Meetup, those things?
Join Meetup, absolutely. Follow Omi, who had her amazing Meetup group. So go to our app. That's the easiest way to do it. Download, the Meetup app on iOS or Android. And if anyone's interested in the book, there's a great audio version of it on Audible as well called Decide and Conquer. And you can check out the book on Amazon or wherever it is. And I'm just so appreciative for you being such a kind of a champion for Meetup, but more importantly, a champion for community, a champion for helping people get the most out of themselves, for motivating people. And, you're just really an inspiration for so many people, honestly. And, I'm lucky to be on on the conversation.
But we appreciate you for being right here. Like we always say, don't be a stranger, be a guest. Contact us at contact@theshellybellshow.com. I am Shelly. Listen, we're switching the show to Omi soon.
We're switching it.
We switching it, right? Because I can stop switching up my words. It's the Shelly Bell Show. I am Omi Bell here with my co-host,
Takia Ross.
Yeah, we'll see y'all next Sunday right here